Nonessential, a short story by George Halitzka, read by the author. I need a smoke. It's been 13 days, and I hate to give up on my streak now, but the way the morning's going, I checked to see if the emergency stash is still on my desk. Yep, 5 cigarettes left. And it's 9:47, almost break time. Maybe the craving will pass if I make one more patient call. I hit the auto dialer for a 74-year-old male. How's my little snugglepuss? Answers a voice. Mr. Wylie? Oh, whoops, I thought my granddaughter. Who's this? My name is Ms. Azrael, badge 48085, calling with the NNRA. There's a long pause. There always is. That's the National Non-Essential Resource Authority, sir. I know what it is, he finally croaks. I'm hanging up now. If you do, sir, we'll follow up with a letter, I tell him, and the sheriff if necessary. It's more humane to... Don't give me that, he snaps. When's my appointment? 30 days. No, this isn't right. My granddaughter won't understand. When she's older. Who gave the first report? It was Braxton Wylie, wasn't it? Never worked a day in his life if he could mooch off his old man. Of course it was Braxton Wylie, I want to tell him. It's always your deadbeat kid, but I'm not allowed to say that. I can't confirm or deny your son's involvement. I can explain what led to the NNRA's determination. Then explain away, he snaps. They all say that. It delays the inevitable. You retired 4 years ago, correct? I didn't want to. They have a mandatory age thing, he says. Then you volunteered for the Haven? Is that a shelter? For homeless folks. I was there 3 times a week for years, but with the neuropathy from my diabetes. And not only did you recently end your service at the Haven, the file says you recently became insulin dependent. I did exactly what the doc told me. The guy's pleading with me now, just like they all do. Walking, counting carbs, checked my sugar 3 times a day like a saint. I even dropped 15 pounds. You try that in your 70s. I search for something positive to say. Well, I admire your dedication, Mr. Wylie, but it wasn't enough for... What's the bottom line? What are the numbers? You know, actuarial calculations are educated guesses. I hope he'll say something to stop me. I still feel guilty laying things out in black and white, but for some reason, people always want to hear it. Go ahead, tell me, he says. I decide to keep it vague. Not for his sake, for mine. Well, comparing your current savings with the cost of long-term care and considering the expense of diabetes treatment with a reduced quality of life together with a history of obesity, the return on investment for your continued maintenance goes negative in 2 months. Maintenance? What am I, a washing machine? It's like when you were raising your children, I say, practically quoting from the training script. You had a paycheck which gave you a finite amount of money, and I always put my kids first, the man says. Even during the pandemic. Of course, because your children were still are America's future. Their maintenance gave you a return on your investment. How about we say I loved them? He corrects me. Naturally. Well, when we perform a cost-benefit analysis for your potential remaining years, I made a lifetime of sacrifices for my kids. Even Braxton. But that's no reason for that. No reason for my country to show a little gratitude. Course not. It isn't a good return on investment. I'm tempted to give back his sarcasm, but I remember the training. Do not unnecessarily upset the patient. Your responsibility is to make the process as humane as possible. You're too young to remember the pandemic, aren't you? Asks the man. Patients always bring that up. I guess it's a coping mechanism, living in the past when the future is... Never mind. Is the pandemic relevant, I ask? Well, it wasn't like this in my day. We believed in life, liberty, and... This isn't the same America where I grew up. Mr. Wylie, America has always prioritized a strong financial foundation. We wisely permitted slavery for almost 100 years. We fought the first 2 world wars to become the world's largest economy. Yes, those actions impacted a subset of people in a negative way, but our country prospered. There I go, quoting the script again. We fought those wars for freedom, snaps the man, and we recognize slavery as evil. Okay, with racism, we didn't, but there were human rights. And there still are, I assure him. You have the right to decide where your resources are allocated before they've been spent on your maintenance. That will benefit your children. Nothing for Braxton, snaps the man. I know he gave the first report, whether you admit it or not. Well, that's exercising one of your rights. I don't tell the man that if Braxton gets a lawyer, this decision won't stick. How can you do this all day? He blusters. With this job, don't you feel any... How do you sleep at night? I have to admit that sleeping was rough for the first month or 2. But the night terrors are rare now, and somebody has to do this. What's the alternative to the non-essential policy? Demolishing the economy like we did in the pandemic? So much for humane. The call timer beeps in my headset, telling me I need to wrap this up. Mr. Wylie, as I told you, there are 30 days before your appointment with the physician. I love how you call them physicians, he snorts. Which will give you time to communicate with your children, consult with your spiritual and financial advisors, and reallocate the resources. Since I'm non-essential, to reallocate the resources that our nation has invested in you. Now, do you have any questions? I wait 10 seconds like the training says. A lot of patients make things easier and hang up, but this guy doesn't. Finally, he speaks. Can I tell you something? He asks tentatively. Something I never... Can I confess? This happens sometimes. People have stuff they need to get off their chests, lying on their taxes or cheating on their wife, and they want to dump their guts on me since I just gave them a deadline. Mr. Wylie, I'm not the right person. It's about the pandemic. I mentioned a spiritual advisor. Please, lady, you can't tell me no. Not after you told me I'm non-essential. My call timer beeps again, and I pull a smoke out of the pack to get ready for break, but then I sigh. Okay, fine. I'll have to file a humane necessity form to justify the extra time, but he seems to need it. I sold cars, he tells me, which meant I was non-essential. Except non-essential in the pandemic didn't mean scheduling your very last doctor's appointment. You just couldn't go to work, which meant you didn't get paid, and unemployment checks weren't enough to live on, not with 2 kids. After a while, I think, this is insane. We're shutting the world down so we could, what, save old people? Kids aren't dying. People my age aren't dying, not many of us. And they said herd immunity could fix it. A lot of people get sick, most of them get better, and it stops spreading. So I go to the demonstrations, the ones started by state TV, we called it conservative news then, demanding that the lockdown stop. Even when demonstrations turned violent and the cops were showing up in riot gear, I kept going. I was terrified, but it worked. We showed those elites that we, the people, were still in charge. Everybody came out of hibernation like the world started spinning again. The economy sputtered back to life. Sure, people got sick. Me and my wife included, but we got better. We figured the death rates in the mainstream media were lies, like state TV said. I realize now people died. I mean, lots of people. I heard 2 million. But the ones who survived bought cars, which put a paycheck in my pocket and food in my kids' stomachs. I learned about the pandemic in high school, Mr. Wylie. I interrupt him because it sounds like he could go on all day. That's what led to the Non-Essential Resources Act 30 years ago. Everything was fine then, the guy continues, like he didn't even hear me. The economy was booming again, partly because we were spending less on nursing homes and hospices, which is when state TV started saying, you know the non-essential movement began with them, right? The politicians didn't have the balls. I went to the demonstration supporting it because it made sense. My mom died from the virus. And it was sad, but she left us her savings and we could finally buy a house. We put her picture by the door like a little shrine. I missed her, but I was glad she helped buy my house. Was that so wrong? She died at 70. Wasn't that enough of a life? I thought, well, isn't it good to get your son a house before you spend it all on a nursing home? The virus reallocated her resources. Why shouldn't we do the same thing on purpose instead of waiting for a pandemic to do it for us? So we get the Non-Essential Resources Act passed. The president said we were making America great again. Then one day when Braxton's a teenager, we're having a fight, okay? Because that's what you do with teenagers. He looks at my mom's picture, then looks at me, and he says, when are you going to be non-essential? And it hits me. They'll come for me. I made this happen, and they'll come for me. Today my phone rings, and I figure it's my Penelope. Do you believe in karma? I don't, not really. But I went to those demonstrations, and you call people to tell them they're non-essential. How old are you, Ms. Azrael? I can't discuss personal details, sir. You sound young, but someday you're going to be 74 and, well, that's all. That's my confession, and that's all. He doesn't say anything else, so I jump back in to confirm his appointment with the physician. And at long last, I hang up. I grab my smokes and head for the door. That 74-year-old male's story it's going to be hard to shake off. I even remember his name, Wylie, which never happens. I'm in for more night terrors. Strangely enough, though, the nicotine craving is gone. I almost tossed my smokes in the trash on the way to the elevator. But by the time I get outside, I decide, screw it. I light up. I've done my research. The life expectancy for a smoker is around 70. The average age to be declared non-essential is 72, and when you think about it that way, well, cancer sticks aren't a bad way to go.